2 days ago, biggest event of my life was whether I was going to have vinyl or leatherette upholstery. Today, I'm sitting here wine tasting with Bacchus, trying to call up an ancient deity. Life. What a trip.
Welcome to the Twilight Pwn, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone
Podcast?
An 80s podcast. Sorry, this 80s Twilight Zone theme is really not doing it. It's throwing me.
Every time we try and use a different opening theme song, it just the rest of the recording
The whole
session
thing grinds to a halt.
Exactly. Yeah, we just have to throw it all out. Well, what's your name? Let's start with that.
My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
Better than you.
Yes.
We are recording right now in the middle of the Super Bowl. You watching right now
Yeah.
as we record this?
It is on, but I'm not paying too much attention. This is our Super Bowl special.
Yeah.
I'm sure all the ponies are just waiting to hear our hot takes as the game unfolds.
What if we recorded an episode it was just us live commenting on the Super Bowl? That would be about as off-brand as it is possible to be. I'm surprised you're not sitting there watching it with your chips and your beers and your American flag and all that. This is really against John's stereotype what gives.
Longtime listeners, close listeners will know that I'm a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and the Steelers lost to the New England Patriots 2 weeks ago, so I don't really care. So it'd be nice for them to lose, but beyond that, I don't really care. So,
got it. Okay, got it.
My investment is done in the season.
Well, continuing with our personal branding, you're the red-blooded American male, and I'm the effete snob.
Yes.
And recently I've been catching a lot of heat for the way I pronounce the word scenario. Because everyone says that saying R, like scenario, as opposed to scenario, is like pompous and stuck up.
Well, for your branding, that seems appropriate.
I know, but it's not even my branding. It's just the way I say the word. How do you say it? Say it.
Well, now that you've, you've kind of,
right.
It's like, telling someone not to think of an elephant.
Don't think of a scenario.
Right. It's kind of like one of those words like aunt or aunt, where I have a kind of an opinion, but I'm actually pretty loose in practice. Like I trip up and will do either one.
I suspect you just try and play both sides.
Well, depending on what company I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. Code switching between scenarios and scenarios. Well, listeners, please feel free to weigh in. But let's get going with the on-brand content here. So by the time you hear this, it'll be almost Valentine's Day. So because we're only doing one episode a month now, we actually have time to plan these, so they kind of are on topic. So we thought we'd do a romance-themed episode.
Hey, there's no guarantee I'll get this edited out anytime near Valentine's Day.
Good point.
Let's not write checks our butts can't cash.
Yeah. It's the first day of summer, and we've got our Valentine's Day special.
Exactly.
But we thought we'd do like a love-themed episode, and for the first time ever, we're going to do an episode of the 80s Twilight Zone.
I think we kind of had a discussion once, way back, about the After Hours. Didn't we both end up watching that 80s segment? Because they remade the After Hours.
Yeah,
so that's the deepest my toes have ever dipped into the 80s zone. Is that about your experience too?
I watched Shadow play as well.
Okay.
We're but innocent young virgins into the 80s zone. So what are we? Please be gentle with us. What are we starting with here?
This week we will be discussing Ye Gods. This is from the first season of the 80s Twilight Zone. This is, according to the internet, known as Episode 5B, keeping with the great Night Gallery tradition of being very confusing. So we learned as we embarked on this journey that it's segment 2 of an episode. So sorry about that, but we didn't do both segments because I didn't want to have to do it.
Okay.
This episode aired originally on October 25th, 1985. And you know what? It didn't have an intro.
Yeah. Do you want to play the outro?
outro?
Shall we hear the outro just to kind of get our juices flowing? Because it's kind of an intro-y outro.
Sure.
The delicate thistledown of romance blows willy-nilly in the scented breeze of chance. On the other hand, Perhaps true love is just a crapshoot, with the dice loaded and the odds rigged from on high Mount Olympus. A condo for immortals in that subdivision called the Twilight Zone.
Sort of contextless, you know. You can kind of slap that in anywhere. Obviously, that's not Rod Serling, because he had slipped this mortal coil by the time this program started going. And I have to say, they kind of swung and missed on the Serling dialogue. I feel like Serling would definitely never say crapshoot. I feel like that's just not a Rod word.
That's fair. And, you know, the condo in the subdivision of the zone is that's more like our kind of writing than Rod's, really.
Yeah. We've gone ahead and written our own Serling style intros. Mine, I'm seeing now, is quite long. I don't know. Does that mean first or second?
Well, mine is one of those high concept, bound to really fall flat ones. So if it's okay, could we go ahead and do mine first?
Sure.
Do you like the Twilight Zone?
It's okay.
The original series was a little too preachy for my taste, but when the new series came out in '85, I think the show really came into its own, commercially and artistically. The whole season has a clear, crisp vision and a new sheen of consummate professionalism that really gives the episodes a big boost. It's been compared to Tales from the Crypt, but I think Zone has a far more bitter, cynical sense of humor. In '85, the Zone released its most accomplished season. I think their undisputed masterpiece is Ye Gods, a show so stylish most people probably don't listen to the dialogue, but they should, because it's not just about the pleasures of love and the importance of forgiveness, but it's also a personal statement about the Zone itself. Now I have to return some videotapes to the Twilight Zone.
Wait, I did not understand that at all. Wait, what was it?
That was a monologue taken from American Psycho, that most 80s satire of the 80s, kind of, reworked to discuss instead of Huey Lewis in the news to discuss the new season of Twilight Zone.
Okay, so if you slap some Huey Lewis underneath that, I'm sure at least 2 listeners will get it. Cool. All right, I went kind of more straight down the middle of the plate. Here we go.
All right.
Submitted for your condo rental application, one Todd Eddington, a fine specimen of that rare species, the tweed-breasted North American yuppie. Like others of his breed, Eddington subsists on a diet of salads and sushi and can mostly be found on coastal cities, in sitcoms, and in hot-take cultural think pieces. Despite having a tasteful, well-appointed nest and a thick plumage of Oxford shirts, he finds himself without a mate, and it seems one bourbon session'll make this young urban professional cry lonely tears. But lest you think this is a sad tale, think again, for what happens next is to laugh. A succession of Greek gods comes to Eddington's aid, and we're treated to a masterclass in the rich comedic potential of obscure mythological minutiae. Imagine if Megara was to return from the shores of Hyginus to wreak vengeance upon the third daughter of Jupiter's union with the mortal Agrippina. Lols, right? Anyway, yuppies plus Greek gods. The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You can just see the pitch meeting, yuppies and in Greek gods.
Yeah. What do you think of one bourbon sessional?
Oh boy, an urban professional. Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. Makes
Cool.
me really rethink my whole thing. I'm gonna have to come back here in a month or two when it's time for our next step.
So since this is the 80s Twilight Zone, it's a little bit harder to find than our usual fare. You can, however, find most of the episodes on YouTube, including this one. And I don't think CBS or whoever is quite as aggressive in protecting their copyright on the 80s Twilight Zone. So I think you're fairly safe up there. So check it out before we get going, because we are about to spoil it. So the episode starts. It just really looks like the music video for Deep Blue Something's Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh really?
Yeah,
I don't know that video. I know that song. But
well, who doesn't know that immortal classic?
Take a detour from the beginning.
Oh sure.
Back when I went to Edgefest in middle school, the premier alt rock festival concert in the Tulsa, Oklahoma region.
Sure.
They had a bunch of one-hit wonders, 90s bands. And Deep Blue Something played, and I never ended up buying their album or anything, but I actually thought they had one of the better sets of the whole thing. I was like, you know what? We got some good songs aside from just that one. It was a good band. I never was really able to parlay that into an album purchase, but just so you know.
In case anyone from Deep Blue Something is listening. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a fun genre of memory, like when you're 12 or 11, going to see a festival. And I remember, like, me and my friends, I think, went to go see, like, probably, like, Smash Mouth, and Radiohead was opening for them, and we were like, oh, who are these guys?
I'm just imagining them playing, like, Kid A to all the people waiting to hear All-Star.
Yeah. We'll shelve this one for 10 years. Yeah, so the music video for Breakfast at Tiffany's is basically, like, the band being whimsical in New York City and, like, having, like, breakfast outside on Fifth Avenue. So it, it's a long-winded way, a very, very long digressional way of saying that it opens on two businessmen having like an al fresco lunch and being very businessman-y. And as they talk about their 80s businessman concerns, they're being watched by I don't know how to describe this guy without being offensive. I don't know. He's like a little. He's got a cravat. Looks a little weird. Any thoughts?
I thought he looked kind of like a rough-looking Mark Hamill.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not offensive.
Yeah.
So let's just grab onto that.
Yeah. He's kind of like the Ron Howard.
The Clint Howard
exactly. To Mark Hamill, like that kind of dichotomy. Anyway, he's watching them in this slightly creepy way.
And I must say, they're really nailing the 80s business talk, right? I mean, he's just like, I don't know if they name a brand, but it's very clear he's talking about a new Beamer, maybe a Volvo, but probably a Beamer, They're just like, it was interesting how they were able to paint a picture so quickly. Hemingway-esque. The 80s was, in what they didn't say.
Yes, exactly. The hills like Drakkar Noir elephants. That didn't make any sense. Yeah, it's aggressively the 80s. There's like that conversation about the car, and then like a woman walks by and they're like, she can get you 70, 80,000 here, but I'll meet you at this place. It's definitely like we know where we are, and when we are. But as this guy Todd Eddington, businessman number one, leaves the lunch plaza, creepy looking guy in the cravat throws a cheap digital effect sprinkle dust effect at him. And just as it hits him...
It really just could not have thrown practical dust at that point in time. It would have blown the budget.
The effect kind of looked like, on like early, video cameras, like sometimes there were like in-camera effects, where they draw like really cheap, like 8-bit, like balloons, and it would say happy birthday. Like it kind of looks like that, pretty much.
Yeah, it kind of has that's why I say like the practical thing. It's like, I feel like that would have been a very easy practical effect, but they were kind of like, we've got computer graphics now. We got to use this is amazing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, when the 8-bit graphics hit Todd Eddington, he trips and bumps into a woman who's also leaving the cafe. And when he gets up to look into her face, we hear some very sexy sex. Yep. There it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, do you think they were like making fun of that kind of music in the episode, or is that just like an 80s audience would be like, wow, that's erotic?
It'd be nice to believe they're being tongue-in-cheek, but I think you're being very, very generous.
All right, cool. Anyway, so, clearly this guy has sprinkled some sort of love dust on him, and he sees this woman, and he sort of falls for her very quickly.
But, they pretty much immediately, lest there be any doubt, get into some really 80s style flirting here.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That was my fault. I wasn't looking where I was going.
That's okay. I wasn't looking either.
I guess it means that neither one of us can sue. I mean, not that I would want to. Could never fit it into my schedule.
Suing and my schedule. Wow, we're your 80s.
Yeah, come on over to my house for Betamax and chill later. They thought it was like mildly clever. I don't know, like a kind of B plus 80s Nick and Nora Charles, Chad and Tiffany Charles. That little beat was okay. I don't think the dialogue for this episode is like horrible. There are occasional little clever moments. I thought that was all right. The sexy sax music kind of fades away, and they, you think they're gonna like exchange. I don't know. Did people exchange numbers and business cards or
business cards? Maybe.
Yeah,
like
they exchange slap bracelets. I don't know.
Cure mixtapes.
Anyway, they don't connect, and as the business
Todd has to go return some videotapes.
Exactly. And the creepy guy watching them is frustrated, and he follows Edinger. In the office, first of all, it looks like a branch library, not like a high-powered corporation. Like, his secretary is just sitting there kind of in a corner, and I don't know. And then he goes into his office, and this creepy guy follows, and right behind him, there's a big photograph on the wall of just a DeLorean. Like, that's all it is. It's just
now it's just starting to seem like The Wedding Singer. Like, they're just trying to make it as aggressively 80s as they can. Yeah. Like, look at all these cultural markers.
Yeah. And then he has all over his shelf, he has all these trophies that look like junior high sports participation trophies.
I do recall that.
Yeah,
yes,
it's weird. Like, I feel like they were like filming something else, and they just, I don't know, dragged him off that set. But anyway, it's kind of funny. Back to the plot, which is really getting going now, because the guy comes in, and the creepy guy, and he says he's Cupid, the god Cupid.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Is this some kind of survey?
You and that woman fell in love back there. Have you forgotten already? What is it with you people? No wonder they call you yuckies.
I believe you mean yuppies.
Yuppies. Yuck. No matter what. Is it something in the frozen gourmet foods that you people eat? Or maybe it's all that aerobic exercising you do? Or it's carbon monoxide gas that you breathe on the freeways that makes you act that way?
Makes us act what way?
The reason that you don't fall in love when I command it.
Yuckies instead of yuppies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I picture like lots of guys in those like blue striped dress shirts with the white collars just cackling over that one.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Nailed us.
Yeah. Not the episode's high point. And there are many high points. So yeah, Cupid is sort of like offering like a Marxist critique of this guy's lifestyle, and he seems frustrated, obviously, because he wasn't able to make Eddington fall in love with the sexy sax lady. We go through the kind of like, standard procedure. That's not possible. You're not. How could you be a god? And the way that Cupid proves it is by like straight up melting this guy's phone with like a high powered. I didn't think of Cupid as being that violent, but it's like, it's kind of like, be ashamed if somebody came in here and melted all your furniture. I don't know. I thought that was just funny. Edinger delivers. I don't know if you got this clip, but did you notice how he gives like a 4-point rebuttal to Cupid?
I didn't get the clip.
Okay.
If you want to walk through some of this,
well,
I vaguely recall.
I'm just recalling back to our last episode we did on the Night Gallery episode where the guy was like, A, Mr. Chichester.
Right.
Well, B. And in this one, he's like, 1, I don't believe this. 2, I have yappy things like that. And it's like, it just strikes me as like it's a certain kind of lazy writing where the writer just kind of like bullet points out the character's motivation like for their own notes, and then just like, let's just roll with it. Let's just leave that in.
I don't know if we've discussed this in the past, but in law school, back when I worked on the paper, I was a columnist, and it was one of my
listicles, yes.
Yeah, one of my little pet peeves was the most popular and the laziest column you possibly could write was the list column. It was it was kind of the last refuge of a scoundrel columnist.
Exactly. You take a listicle and you put quotes around it, and that's your scene.
I felt that these two actors, especially when they were like playing off each other, I just felt they were like driving each other to new depths of awful acting. It was like they just kept kind of like bringing themselves to new terrible places. It was like the opposite of Pacino and De Niro in Heat, It was just like, wow, when you get two crap actors together, they can really, really blow things up.
It's like really, really bad jazz. I'm not sure that I thought they were so bad. It's just such a hokey, cheesy scene. So Cupid gets real angry, and he storms off in a huff, but not before pulling out his bow and arrows and shooting Edinger 3 times in the chest. And I thought it's like done with like a animated effect, and I thought it was kind of okay. What'd you think about the effect?
Okay wasn't the first thought I had. I mean, it was clearly a precursor to some of the Lord of the Rings Legolas moves.
I don't know.
It looked like crap.
I don't think it looked like crap. I think it was like the fairy dust looked garbage. This looks it just because it comes and goes so quickly. You know what I mean? Like if you really linger on it, it looks bad.
The bow appearing didn't look bad. The arrows
the bow.
In the
that's
chest,
what I'm saying.
I thought okay. The bow looked okay.
Yeah, the bow,
the like CGI arrows in the chest looked like crap.
I have to say, just especially based on the fairy dust effect, that sets the bar real low. So when you see the bow, like the way he pulls out the bow, it is cool. I agree. The arrows are like are crap, but we've resolved that debate. On to the next point. So Edinger's walking around a business park with the yuppie from before, his fellow 80s businessman, and he sees the sexy sax lady from earlier kind of prancing in a sort of perfume commercial kind of way. And he chases her, but he can't find her, and so that drives him despondent. And then he sits down with his business bud, and they have some smug 80s bro talk about how their yuppie lifestyle is cold and empty.
I have a job, a car, one condo. No meaningful relationship with any woman. See, I get the feeling that even if I could afford to buy a yacht, I'd still be missing the boat somehow, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly which boat you're missing, too, Todd. The love boat. Todd, this girl that you bumped into today, I mean, she really got your juices flowing, didn't she? Yeah. You know what you need? You need some action, that's what you need.
I'm tired of just having fun. I want something more.
Everybody wants more.
No, not something more. Something else. You know, something different. Different.
There's this woman I think you should meet. She's a woman. She's not your normal, average kind of woman. I mean, she's sort of like into some strange things.
I don't need strange, Peter.
What'd you think of that line? Do you think that was the actor's take on the day?
Yeah. She's a woman thing, or
yeah, I know this woman. Yeah, she's a woman. Like that, you know, possibly kind of transy kind of joke, or something.
Yeah, I think
it's a very. I don't know. I can't imagine that being on the page.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I mean, if even if you go back to like the 90s, like stuff like that is like so common. Is your guess that it would have been too risque, or that it would have been politically incorrect?
This is giving him so much credit. I don't know. Somehow the read was like so unique to him, like natural feeling to him, and like creep feeling to him. I just thought like, I don't know. It's hard to imagine that. Compared to so many of the other lines, it just felt like it was out of something completely different.
Something deep and true and prejudice. Yeah. That guy's like, you know, some actors, you get them in an Apatow movie, they really, improv and come up with great comedic material. This guy's known for like improvising misogynistic prejudice material.
Like Tom Hanks just is fundamentally decent. Like this actor is just fundamentally a creep.
Yeah. The director's like, that was the best take. That was the only take where he didn't insult a particular ethnicity.
It was the most subtle jibe he gave at a community.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that was probably in the script. But maybe Martin Grimes Jr. can help us out on that one. I don't know. And then we're off to the next scene, and then it's night, and Edinger is tossing and turning very, very conspicuously and bad actingly in bed. He got it's funny because like noticing him as a bad actor when he's saying the dialogue, I didn't quite catch it as much in the first couple scenes, but something about the way he's tossing and turning, like he looks like a big baby getting fussy. He's just I don't know. But in the middle of this tossing and turning, he sees a vision of his mystery sexy sax lady.
Like I've got a lot of clips that I can just set to the side for when I might need them later.
Yeah, like next year.
I know you're in the new album. We take a little different direction.
Yeah, exactly. Just in time for Valentine's Day. If you listeners are listening to this on St. Valentine's Day, why don't you turn the podcast up a little bit?
You're listening to TPWA.
Yeah. So after Edinger kind of like, he really just is kind of like recapping the plot out loud, but he does that, and then he does some push-ups to kind of, I don't know, come to his senses or something, and then he's back in his office in the next scene. And he's decided he's going to try and find Cupid, but in order to get to him, he's going to try and find the god Bacchus, who Cupid mentioned earlier in the scene. Cupid was like...
Right. Seems easier.
Yeah,
you know, exactly. I'll just find a different god to lead me to the primary god that I'm trying to get.
Yeah. The funny thing is, when you first see Cupid, you don't even really think of like, oh, that's a Greek god. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of disorienting. But in the original speech, Cupid was talking about other Greek gods and stuff. So you're like, okay, I got it. We're going to do some Greek god stuff later on. And here we are doing that Greek god stuff.
Ooh, Fred.
Yeah.
Can I just stop you before we get some emails? Because this just occurred to me.
Okay.
The Greek god of love is actually Eros.
Okay.
The Roman god is Cupid.
Okay.
So
just
so everyone. Yes.
And is Bacchus the Roman or the Greek god? I'd have to.
Ooh, now you're going for double jeopardy. Let's see. Bacchus is the Roman.
Okay.
And Dionysus is the Greek.
Got it. Okay. So we're all kind of in the Roman.
Rome.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
I take it all back. Roman. So
yes.
The episode kind of skips ahead to Eddington having found these two Roman gods. They're at some sort of like... I don't
trade association like get together.
It's so odd. It's so funny because like I have to assume this was not a big budget show, but they like absolutely pack the frame with extras. They could have easily just shown the two Roman gods like eating dinner or having a nice quiet meal together, but instead it's just like, yeah, they're like in a hotel lobby and everyone's milling around and like...
Well, to give them credit, like Bacchus, is like the god of the feast and the party, but like I picture Bacchus at like a rager, and this is like some kind of like cocktail reception. Yeah. Like everyone's in suits. It's like 5 o'clock.
It's not. It's just more like brunch time.
Right. I don't know. It does not seem like a bacchanalia, as I've been led to believe.
Yeah, Bacchus is like the god of minimally indulgent brunches.
The god of your aunt's 50th birthday.
Yeah, like that. Cupid is pretty drunk on Bacchus's wine. Of course, Bacchus in this sort of 80s version of Roman gods is like a wine snob or something. And Eddington runs up to them, and Cupid, being quite drunk, gives us the sort of kind of "this is why I drink" speech. Apparently he's off his normal game because he broke up with one of the Furies, or one of the Furies broke up with him. Megara is her name. And there's like a long scene of wine jokes, I guess. But the gist of this is basically that Edinger reasons that if he can get Cupid and Megara back together, then Cupid will be on his game and he can find his weird mystery sax lady. And that's kind of, what the plot of the episode is going to be. Any thoughts, John?
Now, this is... Well, just because now I'm checking them all, Megara is actually from Greek mythology.
Oh, so they kind of mixed and matched.
Yeah.
I always wonder, like, when people go with the Greek or the Roman things, like, is there some, like... I'm just always tempted to kind of like assume that choice is more meaningful than it really is. You know what I mean? Like, red staters, they love the Roman gods. Whereas like we coastal elites love our original Dionysus. And you know what I mean? What's more popular? Probably the Roman gods?
I don't know. I was a Greek god man myself when I went through that phase in elementary school, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the Greeks did invent them.
I don't know if I could speak to that.
Okay.
That might be.
I
don't want to be on record agreeing or disagreeing. I don't know if that's accurate.
Look, the fact is, I won the election, John. Stop litigating it. Anyway, I apologize. Bacchus has like an idea about how Eddington get in touch with Megara. There's like a Latin incantation that he can say that might call her. So he writes it down for Eddington on a 3x5 note card. And the next shot is an insert shot of the Latin incantation, and this is quite nitpicky, but it just looks like it was written by a kindergarten teacher. Like, it's just got that kind of very like neat rounded handwriting. I don't know, I dug that. But Eddington or whoever it is, he's at home in bed on a stormy night reading this Latin incantation over and over and over.
And if I could play a little bit here.
Magna Dei exubterum Dona nobis servante megera, et tibi excepta gratis. Magna Dei ex subterum, dona nobis servante megera, et tibi excepta gratis. Magna Dei ex subterum.
You are determined to spend the rest of your life as slime mold, aren't you?
So I play that Latin screaming and all just because I'm curious. Does it remind you of anything?
No. What does it remind you of?
It reminds me a lot of that scene from Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders when Jonathan Cooper starts reading from the magic book.
Oricerare, Oricerare, Mother Merlin.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that was my touch point.
I hear you. We're sorry, listeners. That's a reference to Mystery Science Theater 3000. And there's an episode called Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders that was probably filmed a few years later, but just has the general kind of forced wacky tone that this episode has. So the point is, the comparison is apt. So anyway, this woman Megara is a British lady with short hair and a big boa constrictor wrapped around her shoulders. She's one of the Furies. She kind of looks a little bit like Sinead O'Connor, and she starts really getting into the weeds of Greek and Roman mythology stuff. This is really where it's all right, the writer bought a book, and we're going to taste the fruits of that research. I think what she's saying is that there was a mortal woman named Drusilla who Cupid was I don't know, having an affair with, which made Megara mad, and then it's kind of like a spurned lover type
demigod, blah 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 blah. Yeah,
this is jumping into trivia, but I did some very cursory Wikipedia research, and I think Megara, and more specifically the Furies, kind of tend to represent a woman scorned in mythology and in literature. So I think it's playing into that. Right. Again, hashtag writer bought a book. And then she disappears, being peace, don't call me again. And he the next morning he goes back to his office, and he's putting up some a Greek parchment, a very fake Greek parchment on his wall, his office door rather. And his secretary comes in. She's like, "What are you doing?" And he explains that the parchment is some sort of incantation that means that any godly being who enters this office won't be able to leave once that thing is on the door, unless he opens it. Yeah. So, and then he gets his incantations rolling again, and he calls Megara, and she shows up in a different kind of Greek god via the 80s outfit. She's all annoyed, but he closes the door behind her, and then Cupid comes in because he called Bacchus and told him to invite Cupid to the party. And we basically
now it's like a bosom buddies episode.
Yeah, it's kind of like the stuck in the elevator episode where
they've got to sort out all their problems.
Where two lovers are locked in the bank vault and have to get through it.
At this point, when you see Cupid right next to Megara, are you kind of just do questions start popping up? Do you start just thinking to yourself, does Cupid have a really good personality we just haven't seen yet?
Yeah.
His personality doesn't seem very good. He doesn't seem very funny, but there's got to be something we're missing here.
Yeah, I mean, Cupid, the actor who plays Cupid is not a good-looking guy. And Megara is pretty hot. I mean, maybe it's a power thing. I don't know. He's really well connected or something. I'm not quite sure. They kind of are starting to make up a little bit and we get some corny digital effects, like putting a little crappy heart around them. And Ettinger goes outside to kind of let them, finish their lovers' tiff. He heads back in several hours later and he finds that they've left. And he finds out that they've escaped out of the window, taking a ride with the window washing crew, which somehow seemed 80s to me. I don't know why. Somehow window washing crews seem 80s. And so he solved their problems, but he's sort of upset because obviously they didn't solve his. He still doesn't know where Sexy Sax Lady is. It seems as though all was for naught. But then, John...
Okay. Yes.
Then he has kind of a yuppie freak out and is I'm going to return to my yuppie ways, and he gets out a car catalog and he's going to buy a new car to soothe his yuppie soul. And in the next scene we see him driving and he's rear-ended by a cool other yuppie red car, And guess who's driving it, John?
I guess it would have to be his creepo friend. I mean, who else could it be? I don't know.
Emma Stone. It's La La Land.
What?
No, it's the sexy sax lady. And they just kind of kiss right away, I guess. I don't know. They kind of jump past the 80s Nick and Nora Childs dialogue and just start making out. And while they're making out, the two gods drive by in some sort of weird old-fashioned 20s car that makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, because, the ancient Greek Model T.
It's very odd because it's like this whole episode has kind of been like Greek and Roman gods meet the 80s. And then it's like, why are they driving in that old car? No sense. But, yeah. Ettinger gives them kind of like the, it stinks, okay. sort of the big thumbs up. And they drive off into the distance, and we hear what we used for our intro, and it worked, but it also works for the outro. Let's hear it now.
The delicate thistledown of romance blows willy-nilly in the scented breeze of chance. On the other hand, perhaps true love is just a crapshoot, with the dice loaded and the odds rigged from on high Mount Olympus. A condo for immortals in that subdivision called the Twilight Zone.
So that's the episode. That's our first dip into our first of no doubt hundreds of dips into the 80s Twilight Zone. And having not seen that many episodes of the 80s Twilight Zone, everything that we say from here on out comes with that caveat. But I feel like Greek and Roman mythology is like a bad fit for the Twilight Zone. I feel like whenever the Twilight Zone dips into pre-existing mythologies, even if it's just being wacky, it just doesn't work. Like, there's no vampires in the first Twilight Zone series. There's no like mummies. There's no zombies. And I know that Greek mythology is
some devils, I guess.
Yeah, but the devil is like
there's not really like
devil's like kind of elemental bad guy, I feel like something about like using a pre-existing mythology, just like it gives it too many like rules that you kind of know, so it's less creepy or less. It just doesn't feel Twilight Zone. Like that's the best way I can describe it.
I think it's like we're trying to nail down why this is crap. Yeah. It's like I'm not sure if that's it. That might be it. Like that episode with the television that was, the like television repairman seemed to be some sort of like low-level god or mischief maker fairy.
But not really.
But like not an established one. Like I feel like Queen of the Nile was some sort of like vague mythology. Like
I think that the thing is like whenever it dips into like a pre-existing mythological world with very clear like rules, it almost feels like it's playing with somebody else's dice. Whenever you get into a situation with a vampire where there's a vampire involved, you're like, okay, here's kind of what the rules are. And the story becomes like a vampire story more than it is like a Twilight Zone story. And I feel like the Twilight Zone really thrives. And I mean, admittedly, it's different with comedic episodes, but it really thrives in situations where there's like this sense of unknown. Like you really don't actually know what's going to happen next in the good episodes anyway. And when you have like Greek gods, you're kind of like, okay, this god's related to this god, so that's what, you know what I mean? It feels just wrong somehow. But again, having not seen that many 80s Twilight Zones, I'm not sure what the feeling of that show is exactly.
Yeah, it becomes like the Twilight Zone presents Greek mythology or something. Like it just feels like you're kind of hooking together, trying to get two different kind of mythologies to fit together in a way that isn't as natural. But I mean, I feel like the Twilight Zone could easily have had a story back in the day of like some sort of god of love that's trying to get two people together. But I think it's just I think it's more in the presentation of this story.
Yeah, I think it's like getting into the weeds of like Agamemnon and Drusilla and blah. That's what kind of takes it. Like I can imagine there being a Twilight Zone episode with like a Greek god, but like getting into like the complicated relationships between the Greek god, that's playing weird. That's I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't feel quite right. I don't know if you noticed at the very end when it's showing them in their old-timey car and stuff. I feel like the camera really, the moves the camera were making were really hinting at a helicopter or a crane shot, but they couldn't afford it, so it just kind of went up and up and then swooped back down on the couple.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah,
neither really here nor there.
I also feel like there's a lot of like soaring up, like that seems like it's going to be majestic, but it's probably clearly just trying to avoid the crew. I know what you mean. The whole yuppie thing, like when we look back on the 80s, we think of it as being such like a stereotype or a cultural type that we're aware of now, in a very clear way. But it's kind of funny to see stuff that was made at the time and realize that even at the time people had like a, albeit a not very good sense of humor, but a sense of humor about it, and we're aware of the cultural signifiers. And it's funny to like see that you're in the midst of the yuppie myth getting born. You know what I mean? It's sort of an interesting little cultural footnote or something.
It's basically just like reading Bright Lights, Big City,
exactly.
right?
It's pretty much.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Mark Scott, Zickery, Mark Grams Jr., Zickery and Grams, and IMDb.
Bret Easton Ellis's EGOT.
So just a little bit of trivia. You kind of touched on this. So Megara is the cause of jealousy and envy, according to, I guess, Greek myth.
Yeah.
She punishes people who commit crimes, particularly marital infidelity.
Cool.
And this is somewhat interesting. In modern French, and please forgive me, but Megara, Portuguese Megara, modern Greek, I don't know, that's in Greek letters, so let's just say Megara, Italian Megara, and Russian Megara. I don't know.
Yeah.
This name denotes a jealous or spiteful woman.
Huh.
Google translates all 5 as shrew, so that's nice.
Cool.
But interesting. It's I don't think we have that word in English. I don't recall coming.
Yeah, shrew isn't really the same as a jealous and spiteful woman, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I could see like a spiteful woman.
Yeah.
I don't know about but yeah, sure.
Sort of add on to the mythology little tidbit.
If you have any other trivia.
Apparently, like her sisters, the other Furies, Alecto and Tisiphone, as well as the Melian nymphs, Megara was born of the blood of Uranus when Cronus castrated him. Didn't mention that in the episode.
They had so much to work with. I don't know why they left that out. Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring back one thing here for us. You might remember this.
YouTube comments.
Oh, yeah.
YouTube comments. YouTube comments.
Intelligent discourse.
As you said, we watched this one on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes, and every now and again, when we've been forced to do that, we've tried to track down the most helpful and insightful of the YouTube comments.
There's one I think you may be thinking of for this.
Yes, this comment comes to us by Otniel Cabrera, and he says, "Nice. He has a car, a condo, and he's tired of having fun. Maybe what he needs is a up his on his waterbed. Lol. This episode sucks. Maybe Cupid can do him the favor. Lol."
Yeah. Oh, Otniel. Yeah. There's a few other kind of good ones. Bob Smith says, "I actually started watching this before and gave up. It seemed boring. Just finished it up. Awesome ending. Dug the ending."
I read that before I saw the ending, so I kind of was like, I don't know, I was waiting for a Twilight Zone twist. And then the ending came. I was like, wait, really? That's the awesome? Okay.
This one also isn't really funny, but Cat Roman comments, "I didn't like it. It end too happy."
So we've got some good discussion going on.
Yeah. We're not the only ones teasing apart the nuances of Ye Gods.
That's the end of that. And then as for bios, David Dukes played Todd Ettinger. He's maybe most famous as Ed Sherman in the beloved but tragically short-lived 1997 sitcom Pauly. Everyone remembers Pauly Shore's starring vehicle.
That guy's name is David Dukes. Dangerously close to...
that's one that, if you started acting in the 80s, you maybe didn't know that you maybe want to steer away from that name.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually is maybe most famous for his role in an episode of All in the Family. He received numerous death threats after he played a character who tried to rape Edith Bunker.
Whoa,
so
that's weird.
Yeah.
Definitely never seen that one.
Fred, you might enjoy this bit of trivia.
Oh.
He was in a movie called The Triangle Factory Fire Scandal.
Okay. Why would...
Did you ever have classes in the
the Triangle Factory
building?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a NYU classroom building. Yeah.
Horrible tragedy and moment in American labor history, building caught fire and many women passed away in the fire.
Because the exits weren't proper. They weren't
because the employers had locked the doors so they wouldn't leave. It's horrible. I only mention it because at NYU the building is on campus and it's been renovated and is now used as classes. I actually had at least one, I think a couple classes in that building.
No, for sure. And there's a little plaque on the ground. I think it's called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. Yeah, cool. Cool beans. Yep. Or uncool beans.
Extremely cool beans, yes. David Dukes was Rob Reiner's first choice to play the adult Gordy LaChance, the narrator of Stand By Me, before being replaced by Richard Dreyfuss. Huh. In the first long shot of the adult Gordy, you can still see that it is Dukes, not Dreyfuss, sitting in the car. Oh. The story is about the character's first experience with death. Ironically, Dukes died while appearing in a different Stephen King adaptation. I think it was the hospital one. Maybe it was Storm of the Century. I didn't write it down.
It's kind of weird that he bothered to film one scene of him sitting in a car and then got rid of him. Was it?
Well, I think they probably filmed all the scenes of him and then they probably reshot them with Dreyfuss, but maybe that long shot of the car. Rose red.
I'm just imagining a scenario where he's like, Spielberg just says action and the guy's sitting in the car and he's like, cut, this isn't working, you're fired. Just like the way you're sitting in that car is just not working for me.
I'm not buying it.
Yeah. Call Dick Dreyfuss.
On Broadway he played both Frankenstein and Dracula.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Let's see. Robert Morris played Cupid. He apparently has been in many episodes of the show Mad Men. I have only seen a couple episodes of those, so I didn't really remember him. He's also in The People vs. O.J. Simpson, which I'm hoping to watch soon, but haven't seen. He's won a few Tonys, had a long Broadway career. Among his personal quotes that IMDb has to offer, John Lithgow was absolutely wonderful in Dexter. There's no doubt about it. So
okay. Was Robert Morris in Dexter? Or?
Don't know, but that's IMDb has decided that's one of the ones you want to remember him when he dies.
That's like the one section of IMDb that just clearly is not policed or edited at all. We should just start going in there and putting up random people's opinions. Angelina Jolie. The Twilight Pwn is by far my favorite podcast about the Twilight Zone.
Exactly.
Definitely better than the Twilight Highlights.
Carolyn Seymour played Megara. She had a long career of her own and all, but it is interesting to note that she was previously married to Peter Medak, who was in fact the director of this episode. Oh. So that may have been part of the reason why she got this particular role, or why she deigned to play this particular role might be a better way to put it.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because I would normally say oh, you can totally see that, but since everybody else was kind of bad in the episode, I'm like, she was all right. I don't really care if it was nepotism.
She had a totally normal career. It's not like she was totally the director's girlfriend who just got in it for that. Written by Ann Collins. She did a ton of work on Matlock and Wonder Woman, cool. Just kind of a career television writer.
I wanted to mention something else too, which is that the narrator, the guy who does the Rod Serling style intros and outros, is Charles Aidman, who actually is a Twilight Zone who was in the original series. He was one of the guys in and When the Sky Was Opened Up. He was in a couple other episodes, wasn't he?
I think we mentioned that he played the narrator back in those episodes, but I forgot to cross-reference and write down which ones he was in this time. Yeah. So,
it's kind of a funny little thing. Anyway.
Yeah. Directed by Peter Medak. He directed, a number of movies, a lot of television. A movie I really like from, I guess, late 70s, early 80s called The Changeling. It's a horror movie. It's pretty good. George C. Scott. 7 episodes of the 80s Twilight Zone. Kind of interesting. He's still working up into today. He's directed episodes of Hannibal, The Wire, and Breaking Bad.
Oh, so that's cool.
A lot of good contemporary shows. So
that's kind of cool.
That's cool. Yep. Unfortunately, I looked and looked and looked much longer than I wanted to look through prop managers and accountants and etc., and I could not find a Mystery Science Theater 3000 connection. So I thought I had one because the director directed a movie that had the same title as a thing that Mystery Science Theater once did, but I looked in deep and it was not the same thing. So I got nothing.
All right. Well, what about IMDb ratings?
IMDb gives this episode a 6.0, which is I imagine low, but again, we haven't really done 80s, so we don't really know what the baseline is. And B,
it's
it accounts for 2 segments. So, but I think we can assume that's not so good.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say that's probably not very good.
Yeah, I think I read some comments, and the other episode apparently is not very good as well. That's bunched into this one, although it does feature young Jenny Lewis, one of my like very first crushes. So it would have been a real Valentine's Day special if we talked about her. But
Jenny Lewis of The Wizard and Rilo Kiley fame.
And solo career.
And solo career, yeah.
Anyway, it's pretty bad. It's a bad comedy episode, and I feel like the bad comedy episodes of the original series are even worse and fall even flatter.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
I feel kind of like to some degree maybe that's like just a demonstration of like that bad comedy like just ages poorly, and the farther away you get from it, like the zingers just kind of start to die a slow, painful death. So maybe if we watched it in like 20 years, it'd be like, oh, this is god awful, you know. But I feel like some of the bits are kind of like, you know, somewhat kind of not funny, but just like mildly charming. So I'm not gonna like say it's like a 2. I think it's like a 4 or something. How do you feel?
I'd agree absolutely that it's, I think, supposed to be comedic, but not particularly funny. Maybe it's trending a little bit more towards whimsical than like overtly funny. But I think maybe one of the things it has going that isn't quite as bad as some original series attempts at comedy is I feel like it doesn't hammer the jokes as hard. You know, like you know, the Bard is obviously the like one you always point to, but it doesn't like literally have little wacky sound effects after every terrible joke or anything. You know, it's hard to say when you've got a guy playing Cupid with CGI arrows to say there's like an understated nature level to the comedy. But I don't know. It's just like, it's not as aggressively like, we're doing a funny one this time, guys. Laugh. Like, you know, but it is still not particularly funny and not particularly good. I mean, like, somebody on YouTube seems to think it's got a shocking, exciting twist ending, but I didn't really find it that
maybe it was the car, the old-fashioned car was the shocking twist.
I don't know. So it does seem, and because we also don't have a good baseline of other 80s Twilight Zones, but it would seem a little harsh to put it like in the bottom of anything we've ever seen, but it's not very good. So maybe like a I'm going to go ahead and say 3+, and that might even be a little harsh. You might be right, but just for the sake of saying something different, I'm going to say 3+.
Nice. I'll say 4- because I agree. It's not very good. And that is where we leave Ye Gods. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We're having some life changes around here. John has started up a new job. Congratulations to John.
Yes. Thank you.
So, and I'm actually moving, so we're gonna have.
Yeah, we've been trying to get him out about once a month, but
move on to our next once a year schedule. But it's kind of funny because like a listener just wrote us and he's like, man, you guys should get back to like weekly episodes. What about an Alfred Hitchcock Presents podcast like on a weekly basis? And we're like, no, and we're gonna miss 3 months. I hope there's still a few people listening to this, but anyway, we may miss a little bit of time. Hopefully we won't, but we'll be back in the not too distant future. There's lots of different ways to get in touch with us and request something new for us to do. John, why don't you run them on down?
You could send us an email at twilightpwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Twilight Pwn. You can check us out on Facebook. You could check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You can listen to us on pretty much any kind of podcatcher app. You can subscribe to us on iTunes if you're over there. We really enjoy getting ratings or reviews. Like to read them. To that end, could we say thank you to Cracked Head 747
cool.
Yeah. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. So you kind of alluded to this earlier, but it sounds like you had a childhood interest in Greek mythology. I feel like I did too. I think we both belong to the nerdy subset of kids who maybe had their G.I. Joe phase and their Greek mythology phase.
Right, I think this is kind of like one of those pre-internet things, like when, you know, everyone wasn't connected and didn't know, like, you kind of thought like, oh, I was the unique child who really got deeply, weirdly into mythology in 2nd and 3rd grade and then moved on. I think it's actually a pretty common thing. Did you go through the period of not really knowing quite what to believe, what is real, or at least do you think? And I'm sure if I actually just read a book, I could find a clear answer to this. But were there people back then who literally believed the stories as a religion, or was it always kind of like a shared storytelling thing?
I don't know. I honestly don't know that. I mean, to me as a child, I just thought of it as like a kind of the way that I probably think of the Power Rangers to some degree, Were you trying to go to Greek Orthodox Church or something like that? Mom, we have to celebrate the feast of Agrippinus this week.
Well, I mean, if you're already going to schools where they tell you that your God resurrected and could do miracles, it's like a hop, skip, and a jump to he turned his side piece into a cow so his wife wouldn't find out. I don't know.
That's true. I mean, I went to school in in Berkeley, so so I went to school in a hut where we brewed our own matcha. I don't know. It is fun to have those. I remember I read a abridged version of the Odyssey and built this whole big version of Ithaca out of Legos. It was it was a fun thing for a 5-year-old kid. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Anyway, laughs a minute. All right, John. Congratulations on the new job, and I will talk to you in the not too distant future. Bye now.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.